Some say destiny finds you when you least expect it. I say destiny hits you in the face when you're looking for water in the middle of nowhere. James would never forget that moment. He had been riding for 3 days under Arizona's merciless sun, his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth and his lips cracked. His cattle were dying of thirst, and he was their last hope. But what he was about to find wasn't water. It was something that would change his life forever. The scream cut through the air like a sharp knife, desperate, human. James pulled the reins so abruptly his horse reared up. For 3 days he hadn't seen a single living soul, just cacti, rocks, and animal skeletons. And now this, a scream in the middle of the most desolate desert in the territory. He spurred his horse toward the next hill, and what he saw left him paralyzed. A young woman was running through the valley. He could see her dress, her long black hair floating as she ran with absolute desperation. She ran looking behind her, stumbling, getting up, running again. But what was she fleeing from? Then James saw it, and his heart stopped. A stampede of buffalo, hundreds of them, a dark, furious mass covering the horizon like a living storm. The ground trembled with the fury of 1,000 thunders. The roar of their hooves sounded like the end of the world, and the young woman was directly in their path. James saw everything in slow motion. The girl stumbling again, falling this time, trying to get up, but her legs gave way. She was exhausted, dehydrated, finished. The buffalo were approaching like an unstoppable avalanche. 30 seconds, that was all. Most men would have calculated the odds, the distance, the speed, the chances of success. Most would have reached the logical conclusion. It was impossible. James was never good at math. He launched himself downhill at a suicidal speed. Rocks flew from under the hooves like sparks. The wind ripped off his hat, but he didn't care. His eyes were fixed on the fallen girl and the wall of death rushing toward her. 25 seconds. The terrain was treacherous, one stumble and they would both die. But his horse was brave, raised in these harsh lands, and galloped as if it understood a life depended on it. 20 seconds. He could see the young woman's face now. She couldn't be more than 16. Her eyes showed resignation. She had accepted her death. That made James ride even faster. 15 seconds. The ground shook violently. The roar of the stampede drowned out all thought. He could see the wild eyes of the buffalo, their massive heads lowered, ready to crush everything. 10 seconds. "Hold on," James shouted, though he doubted she could hear him. With a movement perfected through years of rodeos, James leaned from his galloping horse. His hand found the girl's arm. He pulled hard. The weight nearly knocked them over, but James squeezed his legs with superhuman strength. The young woman ended up across the front of him. There was no time for anything else. 5 seconds. The buffalo were so close he could smell their hot breath, see the foam on their mouths. He grabbed his hat and began waving it violently while screaming like a madman. His horse veered sharply to the left. The stampede engulfed them. The world became a whirlwind of dust, roars, and massive bodies passing inches away. James felt the heat of the buffalo, the impact of displaced air. One hit and they would be dead, but the trick worked. The buffalo split around them like a river meeting a rock. They thundered past on both sides, so close he could have touched their flanks, and then it was over. The last buffalo passed. The dust began to settle. The roar faded into a distant echo. They were both still alive. James dismounted with trembling legs and helped the young woman down. She collapsed against him, shaking. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her eyes were sunken. They spoke of days without water or food. "Water," she whispered before her eyes rolled back. James held her and laid her on the ground. He took out his canteen, wet his bandana, and passed it over her lips. Then he gave her small sips of water. He knew giving her too much could make her sick. "It's over," he murmured. "You're safe." The midday sun was relentless. Without shelter, the girl wouldn't survive. His eyes found what he was looking for, the entrance to a cave at the foot of a cliff 100 yards away. He carried her in his arms. She weighed surprisingly little. He walked toward the cave, his horse following. Inside, the cool air was like a blessing. He laid the young woman on his blanket and went out to gather wood. When he returned, she was awake, watching him cautiously. James raised his hands, showing his palms. "Peace," he said slowly. "I just want to help." He lit a fire. Smoke escaped through a crack in the ceiling. He heated water and made tea with medicinal herbs. He offered it to the young woman. She watched him for a long time, evaluating him. Then she took the cup with trembling hands. She drank slowly, and color returned to her cheeks. James offered her dried meat and bread. She ate slowly. "What's your name?" James asked. The young woman looked him in the eyes. "No one," she replied with a weak but clear voice. "My name is No One. I am the daughter of Chief Takoda." James's stomach lurched. He had just rescued the daughter of one of the most powerful Apache chiefs in Arizona. Takoda was legendary, a fierce warrior who protected his people with relentless fury. "How long have you been lost?" 3 days. Her eyes filled with tears. "I went out to find healing herbs for my sick grandmother. A sandstorm disoriented me. I couldn't find the way home." Her voice broke. My father must think I'm dead. My whole tribe must be mourning me. You're not dead, James said firmly. And at dawn, I'll take you to your people. Tonight, rest and regain your strength. No one looked at him with gratitude and wonder, as if she couldn't believe a white man had risked his life for an Apache. As night fell over the desert and the stars began to shine, James sat by the fire, keeping watch. He had no idea what awaited him when he met Chief Takoda tomorrow. He only knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same. Dawn painted the desert in shades of gold and purple. James had slept little, staying alert all night. Every sound, every shadow could mean danger, but no one had come. No one woke with the first light. She looked much better. Color had returned to her face, and her eyes no longer held that empty look of extreme dehydration. She sat up slowly and looked at James with an expression difficult to read. "Thank you," she said simply. "You saved my life." James nodded while preparing the last of his coffee over the embers. "Can you ride? We need to get you back to your people before they think the worst." "Can I ride?" No one replied with determination. "My people must be very worried." They rode together on James's horse. No one showed him the direction, and they rode in silence through the arid landscape. The sun rose quickly, promising another scorching day. After 2 hours of steady travel, no one pointed ahead. "There, that is my people's camp." James saw smoke from several fires rising into the still air, tipis arranged in a circle, figures moving among them. And then, as if an invisible alarm had sounded, the entire camp sprang into action. Apache warriors emerged from everywhere. In seconds, at least 30 men armed with bows, lances, and rifles formed a defensive line. Their faces were stone masks, impossible to read. "Easy," no one murmured behind James. "They won't shoot while you have me." James hoped she was right. He stopped his horse 50 yards from the warriors and raised a hand in peace. With the other, he helped no one dismount. The moment the young woman's feet touched the ground, a cry cut through the air. "No one!" A tall, powerful man emerged from among the warriors. Even from a distance, James could see the authority he radiated. He wore his long hair adorned with eagle feathers. Battle scars marked his muscular arms. His eyes were like tempered steel. Chief Takoda. No one ran to her father and threw herself into his arms. The powerful chief held her as if she were the most fragile and precious thing in the world. His shoulders trembled. James realized with amazement that the fearsome warrior was crying. "I thought I had lost you," Takoda murmured in his native tongue, though James caught the meaning from the tone. "3 days searching for you, 3 days praying to the spirits." "I am here, father." No one hugged him tightly. "I am alive because of him." She pointed to James. All eyes turned to the lone cowboy standing beside his horse, clearly out of place but maintaining his dignity. Takoda slowly let go of his daughter and walked toward James with measured steps. The silence was absolute. Not even the birds dared to sing. Takoda stopped a yard from James. He studied him with eyes that seemed to see directly into his soul. James held his gaze without defiance but without fear. He had done the right thing and would not apologize for it. Then, to everyone's surprise, Takoda extended his arm in the traditional Apache greeting. "My daughter has told me what you did," Takoda said in perfect English that surprised James. "You risked your life for someone you didn't know, for an Apache, when many of your people consider us enemies." "I didn't see an enemy," James replied calmly. "I saw a person in mortal danger. I couldn't just keep riding." Takoda nodded slowly, as if James had passed some invisible test. "There is honor in you, white man, honor that few of your people possess." He turned to his people. "This man saved my daughter from certain death. He found her lost in the desert, protected her from the buffalo stampede, gave her water and food, and cared for her all night without asking for anything in return." The warriors lowered their weapons, some even smiled slightly. "Come," Takoda said, placing a hand on James's shoulder. "You will be our guest of honor." "My people must know the man who brought light back to my life." James was led into the camp. Women and children who had been hiding now came out to see him with curiosity. Some small children pointed at him and whispered among themselves. Elder women evaluated him with wise eyes. They took him to the largest tipi in the center of the camp. Inside, a middle-aged woman with braided hair and gentle eyes was waiting. When she saw no one, she cried with joy and hugged her tightly. "My wife, Ka," Takoda introduced. "No one's mother." Ka turned to James and took his hands in hers. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. The gratitude in her eyes said more than 1,000 words. "Rest," Takoda said. "Tonight there will be a great celebration. The whole village will celebrate no one's return, and you will be the most important guest." James nodded, overwhelmed by the hospitality. They gave him fresh water to wash, abundant food, and a comfortable place to rest from the exhausting journey. As he rested in the cool shade of the tipi, James reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. He had set out looking for water for his cattle. Instead, he had found something far more valuable: He had found respect, honor, built a bridge between two worlds that rarely met in peace. And something inside told him this was just the beginning, that Chief Takoda had plans, ideas forming behind those wise eyes. As the sun reached its zenith and the camp prepared for that night's celebration, James closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest for the first time in days. He had no idea that tonight his life would change in ways he could never have imagined, that Chief Takoda was about to make him an offer no one in the history of the territory had ever received, an offer that would unite two peoples in ways that would change everyone's destiny. Night fell on the Apache camp like a velvet blanket studded with stars. The cool desert air carried the aroma of roasting meat and aromatic herbs. James had never seen anything like it. In the center of the camp, a huge bonfire blazed. Flames danced toward the sky, creating shadows that moved across the gathered faces. The entire tribe was present. Men, women, children, and elders formed concentric circles around the fire. James was led to a place of honor beside Chief Takoda. No one sat on her father's other side, now dressed in ceremonial clothes beautifully decorated with beads and feathers. She looked completely different from the exhausted young woman he had rescued yesterday. The drums began to sound, a deep, constant rhythm that seemed to sync with the heartbeat. Several warriors rose and began to dance, their movements telling stories of home, battle, and survival. "It's the dance of gratitude," Takoda explained quietly. "We thank the spirits for returning no one safe and sound." James watched in silence, fascinated. The dance was hypnotic, primitive, and beautiful. The dancers moved as if they were part of the fire itself. Then came the speeches. Elders from the council rose one by one, speaking in their native language. Although James didn't understand the words, he grasped the meaning through their gestures and tone. They spoke of loss and recovery, fear and hope, gratitude. Finally, Takoda stood. The silence was instant and absolute. Even the small children stopped moving. "My people," Takoda began with a voice that resonated with natural authority. "3 days ago, my heart was broken. My only daughter, the light of my life, disappeared. We searched everywhere. We tracked every canyon, every valley, every corner of the desert." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "But the desert is vast and merciless. I was beginning to lose hope." He turned to James. Then this man appeared, a stranger, a white man. He could have continued on his way. He had his own problems, his own cattle dying of thirst. But when he heard the cry for help, he didn't hesitate for a second. Takoda walked around the fire, his voice rising with passion. He faced a buffalo stampede with only his courage and his horse. He risked his own life to save someone he didn't know, and then he cared for her all night without asking for anything in return. Murmurs of approval ran through the crowd. "This," Takoda continued, striking his chest, "this is what it means to be a true warrior. It's not about the color of your skin or what language you speak. It's about what's in here: courage, honor, compassion." He stopped in front of James and looked him directly in the eyes. "You have shown more honor than many men I have known in my entire life, and for that I must offer you something." The entire camp held its breath. "Among my people," Takoda said with a solemn voice, "when someone saves the life of a family member, especially the chief's child, a debt is created, a sacred debt that must be paid." James began to speak, but Takoda raised a hand. "Let me finish. I have thought long about this. I have consulted with the elders, and we have reached a decision." Takoda extended his arms toward his people. "James, the white man who saved my daughter, I offer you something no outsider has ever received in the history of our people." The silence was so deep James could hear the crackling of the bonfire. "I offer you 1,000 warriors," Takoda declared. 1,000 of our best men will be under your command. They will go where you go. They will fight for what you believe is just. They will be your brothers, your protectors, your strength." A murmur of astonishment ran through the crowd. Even the most experienced warriors seemed surprised. James stood completely paralyzed. 1,000 warriors. He had heard correctly. It was an army, a personal army. With that power, he could conquer entire territories, become rich, become the most powerful man in the West. James tried to find words, but his mind was completely blank. "You don't have to answer now," Takoda said with a slight smile. "This is a decision that must be thought through carefully. Rest tonight, reflect. Tomorrow at noon, you will give me your answer." Takoda gestured, and the celebration continued. The drums started again. Women brought food: roasted venison, fresh corn, cooked squash, hot flatbread. James ate mechanically, his mind spinning. 1,000 warriors. The people around him laughed and sang. Some came to thank him personally for saving no one. An elderly woman gave him a bead necklace she had made herself. A small child shyly offered him a feather, but James could barely concentrate. His mind was elsewhere. 1,000 warriors meant power, real power, but James had never sought power. He was a simple cowboy, a man who loved the land, his animals, the freedom of the open horizon. What would he do with 1,000 warriors? Could he simply accept them and order them to go home? Would that insult Dakota and his people? Could he refuse the offer entirely? Would that offend the chief? As the night wore on and the stars slowly revolved over the desert, James retreated to his tipi. He lay down on the soft furs, but sleep would not come. 1,000 warriors was the most incredible offer anyone could receive and also the most terrifying, because James knew something Dakota might not have fully considered. Power of that magnitude changed people. He had seen it before. Good men who became tyrants when they gained too much power. Honorable men who were corrupted when they had the strength to take whatever they wanted. Would he be different? Could he handle that power without losing his soul in the process? The questions circled in his mind like vultures over carrion. Finally, as the camp fell silent and only the desert wind whispered among the tipis, James made a decision. A decision that would surprise everyone. A decision that would change not only his life but the fate of 2 entire peoples. But that decision would have to wait until tomorrow at noon. For now, he finally closed his eyes and let sleep claim him. The noon sun beat down relentlessly on the Apache camp. James had spent the morning walking alone in the surrounding desert, thinking, reflecting, wrestling with the most important decision of his life. 1,000 warriors. The power to change the balance of power throughout the territory, the ability to protect, to conquer, to build an empire if he so desired, or the responsibility of 1,000 lives under his command, 1,000 families who would depend on his decisions. He returned to the camp at exactly noon. Dakota waited for him outside his tipi, surrounded by the council of elders. Their faces were indecipherable, carved in stone by years of experience and wisdom. "Have you made your decision?" Dakota asked with a neutral voice. James nodded slowly. "Yes, but first I need to ask you a question." Dakota raised an eyebrow in surprise. No one had ever asked for explanations before accepting a gift. "Speak. Why exactly 1,000 warriors? Why not gold, horses, land? Why offer me an army?" Dakota considered the question carefully before answering. "Because I want to see what kind of man you really are. Anyone can be good when they have no power. The true measure of a man is what he does when he has the power to do whatever he wants." "It's a test," James understood. "It's an opportunity," Dakota corrected. "For you, for my people, for all of us." James took a deep breath. "Then I accept your offer. I accept command of 1,000 warriors." A murmur ran through the elders. Some seemed satisfied, others cautious. "But," James continued, raising a hand, "with one condition." Silence fell like a rock. No one put conditions on a gift from the chief. Dakota narrowed his eyes but gestured for him to continue. "These 1,000 warriors will not be an army of conquest. I will not use them to enrich myself or to take land. Instead, I propose something different, something never done before." James turned to face not only Dakota but the entire council. "I propose creating a peace force, 1,000 warriors dedicated not to making war but to keeping peace between Apache and settlers, between your people and mine." "Peace," repeated one of the elders with skepticism. "White men don't want peace, they want our land." "Some do," James admitted honestly. "But not all. There are good men on both sides, families who just want to live in peace, farm their land, raise their children. The problem is that the violent ones on both sides make so much noise they drown out the voices of the peaceful ones." He turned to Dakota. "Your daughter told me she went out to find medicinal herbs for her sick grandmother. How many more grandmothers are there? Both Apache and settler women who need medicine. How many children play without care, unaware of their parents' hatreds? How many people just want to live?" Dakota listened intently, his expression impossible to read. "Imagine this," James continued with growing passion. 1,000 warriors divided into groups, some protecting trade routes from bandits who attack both Apache and settlers, others mediating disputes before they turn into bloodshed, others ensuring treaties are honored by both sides. "It's a beautiful dream," Dakota said slowly. "But dreams don't survive contact with reality. There will be resistance from your people and from mine." "That's why we need 1,000 warriors," James replied. "Enough to be respected, enough to be heard, enough to make a difference." An elder with completely white hair rose. His name was Kuruk, the oldest member of the council. "I have lived 70 winters. I have seen many promises of peace. All were broken. Why should I believe this time will be different?" James looked him directly in the eyes. "Because this time it's not just words, this time it's action. This time it's 1,000 men committed to a common purpose. And because for the first time we have a real bridge between 2 worlds." He pointed to no one who watched from the side. "She lives, that creates a debt, but more than that, it creates a connection, a bond between an Apache chief and a white cowboy. If we 2 can work together, why can't our peoples?" Dakota walked slowly around James, studying him from every angle. Finally, he stopped in front of him. You speak well, but words are easy. How do I know you will keep your promise? How do I know you won't use these warriors for your own benefit once you have them? You don't, James admitted. Just as I don't know if you will really give me 1,000 warriors or if this is some kind of trap. In the end, it all comes down to trust, and trust must start somewhere. He extended his hand. I trust you, Takoda. I trust that you are a man of honor who keeps his word. Can you trust me? The entire camp held its breath. Takoda looked at the outstretched hand for a long moment. Then he looked at the elders. One by one, they nodded slowly, some with conviction, others with reservation, but all nodded. Finally, Takoda took James's hand in a firm grip. I accept your condition, 1,000 warriors to keep the peace. But listen well, James. If you betray this trust, if you use these men to harm my people, there will be no place in this territory where you can hide. Understood, James replied without hesitation. And one more thing, Takoda added with a slight smile. I won't give you 1,000 warriors and send you off alone. That would be foolish of me. I will go with you. I will be your co-commander. Together we will lead this peace force. James blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected that, but the more he thought about it, the more sense it made. An Apache leader and a white cowboy working side by side, it would be a powerful symbol. It would be an honor, he said sincerely. Takoda turned to his people. Let it be known. From this day forward, 1,000 of our warriors will form a new brotherhood, not to make war, but to build peace. They will be known as the Guardians of the Horizon. A roar of approval rose from the camp. Not everyone was convinced. James could see it on some faces, but most seemed hopeful, as if there was finally an alternative to endless violence. No one approached James with tears in her eyes. Thank you not just for saving me, but for this, for giving my people a chance at something better. James nodded, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had just accepted. He had come to the desert looking for water. Instead, he had become co-leader of a peace force of 1,000 warriors. Life, he thought, was truly unpredictable. But as he looked at the hopeful faces around him, he knew he had made the right decision. Now he just had to prove it could work. 3 days later, the valley resonated with the sound of 1,000 voices. James had never seen anything remotely like it. 1,000 Apache warriors formed in perfect rows, each representing the best of their tribe. Young men full of energy, veterans marked by battle scars, all united under a completely new purpose. Takoda stood beside James on a raised rock, observing the gathered men. The rising sun painted the sky orange and purple, as if the universe itself celebrated this historic moment. I never thought I would see this day, Takoda murmured. 1,000 Apache warriors swearing to protect both my people and yours. There are still skeptics, James observed, pointing to some faces in the crowd. Some don't trust this. There will always be skeptics, Takoda replied. Our job is to prove them wrong. He turned to the gathered warriors and raised both hands, asking for silence. The stillness was instantaneous. Warriors, his voice boomed across the valley. Today begins something our ancestors never imagined. Today we do not march to war. Today we march toward peace. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. I know some of you doubt. You have seen too much betrayal, too much blood spilled between our people and the white settlers. Why trust now? He pointed to James. Because this man risked his life for one of us without asking for anything, because he proved that honor has no skin color, and because if we continue on the path of eternal war, there will only be death and suffering for everyone. James stepped forward. Will not ask you to forget the past. That would be insulting and impossible. But I ask you to consider the future, a future where your children and mine don't have to grow up in fear. His voice grew stronger. We will be the guardians of the horizon. We will protect the innocent on both sides. We will hunt down the bandits who terrorize the roads. We will mediate disputes before they turn into massacres. And little by little, step by step, we will build trust. A young warrior stepped forward. What if the settlers attack us, if they shoot at us despite our good intentions? Then we will defend ourselves, James answered without hesitation. This is a peace force, not a surrender force, but we will only use force when all other options fail, and we will always seek justice, not revenge. Another warrior spoke. How will the settlers know we are different, that we are not just another war party? Takoda smiled. Excellent question. He gestured, and several young men brought flags they had been preparing. They were a brilliant turquoise color with the symbol of the rising sun embroidered in gold. This will be our standard, Takoda explained. When people see these flags, they will know the guardians of the horizon have come. They will know peace and protection have come. James added, we will divide into groups of 100. Each group will have its assigned territory. We will establish posts in key locations. And most importantly, we will hire messengers from both peoples to spread the word. Over the following hours, they organized the details. The 1,000 warriors were divided into 10 groups. Each group received a leader, half experienced Apache and half trackers familiar with settler customs. No one approached with a map she had drawn. I have marked the places where there is the most conflict, here where ranchers accuse our people of stealing cattle, here where some settlers illegally cross sacred territory, and here where bandits attack both groups. James studied the map carefully. We will start with the smaller problems, quick victories that prove this works. Once we have credibility, we will tackle the larger conflicts. Dakota nodded, approving the plan. Wisdom, you can't build a house starting with the roof. As evening fell, the guardians of the horizon were ready to depart. The 10 groups would head to their assigned territories at dawn. But first, there was a final ceremony. Dakota and James stood together in front of all the warriors. Each held a lit torch. Let this flame represent the light we bring to the darkness, Dakota said solemnly. May it never go out as long as there are those who believe in peace. And may those who see this light know they are not alone, James added. That there are those who fight for something better than endless war. Together, they lit a large central bonfire. One by one, each warrior approached, touched the bonfire with their own small torch, then joined their group. It was beautiful, symbolic, and the beginning of something that could change everything. As the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, James sat beside Dakota away from the bustle. Do you think it will work? James asked quietly. Dakota took a long time to answer. I don't know. There will be resistance. There will be failures. Some of our men will likely die. Not all settlers will accept this. Not all Apache will trust. Not exactly inspiring, James commented with an ironic smile. But, Dakota continued with a gleam in his eyes, for the first time in many years there is hope, real hope, and that is worth every risk. He turned to James. You saved my daughter. With that, you saved my world. Now together we will try to save a larger world. We may fail, but at least we will have tried. James extended his hand. To trying. Dakota grasped it firmly. To trying. And to proving that even in the hardest, driest, most unforgiving place, something beautiful can bloom. The next morning, when the sun once again painted the desert gold, 1,000 warriors mounted their horses. Turquoise flags waved in the wind. Some headed north, others south, east, and west. Each group carried the same message. There was a new force in the territory, a force of justice, mediation, protection. The guardians of the horizon were born. James rode beside Dakota toward their own assigned territory. As the camp disappeared behind them, he thought about everything that had happened. He had set out looking for water. Instead, he had found purpose. The road would be difficult. There would be setbacks and tragedies. But for the first time, two peoples who had been at war for generations had a real chance at peace. And it all began with a simple act of kindness, with a man who heard a cry in the desert and decided that one life was worth more than his own safety. Sometimes, James reflected as the sun warmed his face, the biggest changes begin with the smallest gestures. The horizon stretched infinitely before them. For the first time in a long time, that horizon promised hope.